Happy Halloween, everyone. And I've been wanting to do this video for a long time now, and here it is finally. My top 10 favorite horror movies. When it comes to the horror genre, I'm not a diehard fan of it, but there are a handful of movies from the genre that I really like, and here are the top 10 that I love the most. And if any horror movies that you love don't make this top 10 list, that's okay. And if you don't like a huge majority of the movies on my list, that's fine. As long as we can respect our opinions, we're good. Alright, let's not waste any more time and let's dive into my top 10 favorite horror movies. And let's start with number 10. And number 10 is
The Thing.
Definitely one of the more underrated horror movies. Because when The Thing first came out in 1982, critics weren't huge fans of it. But honestly, I love it. I think it is a flawless horror masterpiece. And for those critics who didn't like it when it first came out, what is wrong with you people? What makes The Thing a horror masterpiece is it's not only creepy and suspenseful, but it doesn't focus too much on gore like some horror movies nowadays do. I mean, there are some gore in The Thing. It's kind of a gross movie. And without spoiling anything, if you're a dog lover, you are not going to like this movie. But I like dogs, but I still really enjoy this movie. Alright, let's move on to number 9. And number 9 is
The Exorcist.
The Exorcist is considered to be, by many, the scariest movie of all time. I don't think it's that level of scary. It's a really scary movie. Don't get me wrong. It's really creepy, but it's not, I wouldn't call it the scariest movie of all time. However, is The Exorcist still fantastic? Absolutely. What makes The Exorcist a great movie is it's really unpredictable. You're not sure what's going to happen with Reagan, who is the little girl who gets possessed. You're caring for her, but you feel really bad for her because the devil is possessing her and it's making her into this profane little freak. Here's another thing that I will praise The Exorcist for. The makeup they use for Reagan when she's possessed is phenomenal. And I will say this about The Exorcist. It sure is a lot scarier than the crap that we get today. Let's move on to number 8. And number 8 is
Halloween.
So when Halloween first came out in 1978, no one knew what it was about. It was a low-budget horror movie that I think not a lot of people saw, but thank God it was a hit because it's one of the few independent movies nowadays to get a lot of attention. And honestly, Halloween is one of the best horror movies ever made, and it's one of my favorites. I mean, sure, the acting is a little cheesy, but the one actress in this movie who probably gives the best performance of her career is Jamie Lee Curtis. And ironically, this was the first movie that she was in, and she's fantastic in this movie. And Michael Myers. Okay, he is one of the best characters and villains in movie history. Halloween is a very suspenseful and creepy movie. And if you guys haven't seen it, go check it out. It is fantastic. Let's move on to number 7. And number 7 is
Alien.
If I were to describe Alien without giving away the plot, it would be Jaws in space. Alien is one of the creepiest movies ever made in the horror genre. I mean, is it as scary as it used to be when it first came out? No, because when you see the monster, it's not that scary because it's pretty obvious that it's a guy in a costume, but still, the design of the monster is really creepy, and Alien is a very claustrophobic and creepy movie, and it's a very slow movie. It takes a while to build up the suspense, but I don't mind it, because I like it when horror movies take a while to build up the suspense before the monster shows up and just slaughters everyone. Because the best horror movies have that, and that may be a problem with some people, but honestly, I don't mind it. Alright, let's move on to number 6. And number 6 is
King Kong.
whatever. I don't care what anyone says. You can probably fight me in the comments, but I think King Kong is the best monster movie ever made. The way I see it, there are two types of people. There are people out there who think King Kong is a horror movie, and people who don't think King Kong is a horror movie. I think it is a horror movie because it's a monster movie and it's about a giant monkey who terrorizes New York City. And honestly, no other monster movie in cinema history will ever top King Kong. And the stop motion effects do hold up. Well, for the most part. I mean, come on, for a movie that was made in the 1930s, it has some pretty darn good effects. So we come to this, the top 5. So let's move on to number 5. And number 5 is
Psycho.
Do I think Psycho is Hitchcock's best movie? No. I would pick Rear Window for its best movies, but Psycho, it's still a masterpiece. Psycho is suspenseful, it's creepy, and it's unpredictable. And the shower scene. Okay, the shower scene in Psycho is one of the scariest and most iconic scenes in cinema history. And Norman Bates, okay, that guy gives me the creeps. And Anthony Perkins gave a incredible performance as Norman Bates in this movie. And there is a plot twist in this movie that I will not give away just in case if you haven't seen it yet. But let's just say it's not what you expect. Let's move on to number 4. And number 4 is
Jaws.
So Jaws was the movie that put Spielberg on the map for one of the most iconic directors in Hollywood. Just like with Alien, Jaws takes a while to build up the suspense for when the shark shows up, and I don't mind it at all. It's fantastic, and it's relevant to the story. And what makes Jaws a fantastic movie is it doesn't focus on the shark. And while the shark is the focus, it doesn't make him the main focus of the movie. It focuses on the characters. You care about the characters in this movie. And Jaws, okay, the shark does look fake. I mean, it's pretty obvious nowadays that it's a robot, but honestly, Jaws gave me nightmares a few times. It's a pretty creepy movie, and it will make you not want to go back into the water. Let's move on to number 3. And number 3 is
Shaun of the Dead.
Shaun of the Dead is one of the best comedies ever made. And come on, I had to put a comedy on here somewhere, and spoiler alert, but number 2 is a comedy as well. Shaun of the Dead is a spoof movie on zombie movies, and it's directed by Edgar Wright, who would later go on to direct Hot Fuzz, World's End, Scott Pilgrim, and Baby Driver. And it stars Simon Pegg and Nick Frost. And, okay, these two actors have great chemistry in this movie, and they're like brothers. What makes Shaun of the Dead a fantastic movie is it's not only a creepy and funny movie, but it's also kind of a surprisingly touching movie because you care about the characters, and you care about Shaun and Ed, who is Nick Frost's character, because you can relate to these characters, and they're some of the best characters in movie history. And if you guys have not seen Shaun of the Dead, check it out. I highly recommend it. It's one of the best comedies you'll ever see. And Shaun of the Dead is also part of a trilogy called the Cornetto Trilogy, and that trilogy also includes Hot Fuzz and World's End. And if you guys haven't seen any of those movies, check them out. I will force you to. They are hilarious movies. Let's move on to number 2. And number 2 is
Ghostbusters.
In my opinion, Ghostbusters is the best horror comedy ever made. Ghostbusters is one of the best comedies ever made. It is hilarious. It's quotable. The performances are fantastic. It's a very simple story. It's off the wall. It's insane. And it's a fun movie. Like, it's Ghostbusters is one of those movies, if you guys don't like it, you should never watch movies. It's one of those movies that is impossible to hate. And Ghostbusters is one of those movies that I will love until I die. And okay, there are some people out there who think Ghostbusters isn't a horror movie because it's more of a comedy. I mean, that is true, but come on, it's a horror movie. Let's face it. Let's move on to number one. And my number one favorite horror movie is
The Shining.
The Shining is not only my favorite horror movie of all time, but I think it is the best horror movie ever made. And here's why. The Shining builds up suspense in a way that is not boring at all. It does it in a way that is creepy and suspenseful and unpredictable. And the performances are phenomenal. Jack Nicholson is fantastic as Jack Torrance. He's creepy and hilarious. And Shelley Duvall is phenomenal as Wendy, who is the wife. And I forgot the kid's name, but he is phenomenal as Danny, who is the son. And the kid who plays Danny was one of the best kid actors ever to be put on screen. I mean, he doesn't act anymore, which is kind of sad though. But The Shining, it's creepy in its atmosphere. It's a very suspenseful movie, and usually movies that were made during this time period, like the 80s, usually those kind of movies aren't very scary, but The Shining is a creepy movie, and the atmosphere makes it even more creepier. If you guys haven't seen The Shining, I highly recommend watching it. It is a phenomenal movie, and it is my favorite horror movie of all time, and it is, in my opinion, the best horror movie ever made. And just like with Psycho, it will make you not want to go to a hotel ever again. Alright guys, that's it for my top 10 favorite horror movies. And I have a question for you guys. What are your favorite horror movies of all time? Whatever they are, just comment below. And if you want to see more of my videos, just be sure to subscribe.